Hey guys, it's Nico Lyon. I want to tell you guys about some of my best tips that I got for drawing and improving your skills as an artist. Now, I'm quite an experienced artist, but this also goes for the beginner and also the amateur. And even the experienced artist can benefit from this information, this advice, this encouragement. So this video is called Fastest Ways to Improve and Better Your Drawing using my tips and my advice. All right, so let's get to it. So first, I'm going to show you one of my drawings here. It's from my comic book called, I'm not going to reveal the name of that right now, but it's from my comic book I'm working on. It's my original comic book. As you can see, this is a character I drew. And I don't know if you can really see that too well, but yeah, it's a character I drew, and it's supposed to be an original character of mine, right? So yeah, you get you can get that level of skill by practicing, and this was really just a practice drawing for me, and you know that's how I get better. I just practice, but people say practice, 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 but it's not always practice, practice, practice. Sometimes you have to actually sit back and you actually have to understand what you're practicing and why you're practicing that, and if there's any way to make more efficient what you're practicing, or maybe you can practice it in a more efficient way. So sometimes you have to reassess your methods of practicing and what techniques you're practicing. So first thing on the list is when you want to get better at drawing and improve fastest ways is perspective. Perspective, perspective, perspective. Because if you can get your perspective down, you can draw anything in any direction, from any height, from any depth, from any volume, in any shape. And perspective is the way we see things in the world, and that's the reason why when you represent it on a two-dimensional paper or canvas or anything that you draw on, is the reason why it will show up like life and lifelike, because you're representing three-dimensional objects and forms and values on a two-dimensional plane, and most artists understand that already. But that's probably one of the chief things you can learn to properly render art on any surface that you draw on or do any artwork on. So yeah, perspective. I know most people, like when I first started learning art, and even after now, and I'm very experienced, I've always neglected perspective in the past. But here and there, I came back to perspective to improve my skills on it, because I knew that without perspective, you can't really show the viewpoints and the intricacies of what you really want the viewer to see, or the reader, or whatever, your audience. So yeah, perspective. You need to definitely understand 1 point perspective, 2 point perspective, and 3 point perspective. You can understand those three, you're in there, and especially if you master them, then you can move on to 4 point and 5 point, and eventually just making up your own perspectives, however you see fit, and to your needs. Because once you understand perspective and the fundamentals of it, you can manipulate it to whatever you need it to do. And it's very, very, very useful. There's no art that does not use some form of perspective. That everything you see with your eyes open has some form of perspective. So yeah, learn perspective and master perspective, and you'll be on your way. Even if you're an experienced artist, go back to perspective, master it some more, till you can do it in your sleep, till you just know how to do it, period. Yeah. So then, number two, you got the values, or we call them tones or values, of light and dark. So that's another fundamental that is so important when you're drawing anything in the scene world, or in fantasy or fiction, or whatever it is you're drawing and representing. You're gonna have values. So let's say you just do like a line drawing. You draw a line. You draw the out shape of some object, whether it's like a car, or a spaceship, whatever it is. You get the outline, so you capture the mass of the object, right? You capture the form of the object, but it won't really have form until you begin to depict it in perspective, in space, until you assign values to the object or the form. So you're gonna have no matter what form it is, unless it's white space, you're gonna have you're gonna have values of light and dark. As you can see on this image, there's values of light and dark. There's value like this is a highlight right here. Then you see on the rope, there's texture, which you can represent with your pencil stroke or your paintbrush stroke, which will have darker lines because those lines depict the object is receding into the object itself. So you will have a darker line, like such as with my skin. You can see that my skin right here is the darker line between my thumb and my index finger is because the light there's not a lot of light there. So as you see when I remove it, the light comes back. So it's the same principle, even with the art itself. So you have lighter tones or values, then you have dark tones and values. You have dark tones and you have light tones, highlights. You have reflected light. Reflected light is that little piece of sliver of light on the charger, on the outlet port right there. And then you have the pieces that plug into the wall. They're highlighted right here, whereas these are dark because they're more close in the background. This is more close in the foreground, or at least that one is more close in the light. So yeah, values of light and dark on everything you see around us. You have a highlight. This is the actual color of the object, this brownish color, and then this is the core shadow. This is the darkest part of the object that has the less light on it, and this is just a dark color. This is inside of the object. So there's no light really getting in there. There is light getting in there, but it's not a lot of light. As you can see, it's not a lot of light. So yeah, and you see this would be reflected light right here, and this would be the actual color of the object. So once you understand these values of light and dark, you pretty much can draw anything once you capture the line drawing of it or the object drawing of it. And then you just assign values of light and dark. It will always be values of light and dark. Tones, whether it's white tones, half tones, mid tones, dark tones, or the darkest tones. It will always have these value assignments to anything that you draw that has color or can be represented in values of black and white. All right, number 3. So yeah, master values. Learn how to use values in the things you draw and contrast. See, some people, a lot of artists, when they're first starting, they don't use enough contrast in what they draw. So the objects don't resemble a three-dimensional image as much as they could. So definitely work on values and assigning contrast to those values, whether it's from light to dark or dark to light. Also learn how to blend, and learn how to shade properly. Learn those things. Those fundamentals go a long way. So number 3, learning where and how you make errors when you draw, or where you have a tendency to make mistakes and work on them. So a lot of artists, they keep practicing until it makes perfect, which is great advice. But that is only great advice when you understand what you're practicing and where you're making errors in what you're practicing. So you don't continue to make those errors, but you improve on those errors and don't make those errors anymore. Because that's the only way you truly improve. If I was playing basketball or football, I'm not going to keep shooting the ball the same way that is making me miss, even though I'm practicing every day. I'm going to try to improve and say, you know what, maybe I should use my arm to propel the ball higher than to use my back, So just those efficiencies help in anything that you practice in life. It's noticing where your errors are and where you tend to make errors. That's what you need to focus on. So yeah, focus on where you make mistakes, and it's okay to make mistakes. We all make mistakes. You just gotta say, okay, I made a mistake on drawing the head. I made a mistake on drawing the leg or the landscape. I made a mistake on drawing the tree trunk or trying to render the texture on the tree trunk. How can I render that better? How can I render the leg better? How can I render the bones of the feet better? How can I render that better so it looks more real? If you're going for a real look, if you're going for a more cartoon look, how can I stop making it look so real? You see what I'm saying? So those little things like that. When us as artists, we all solve problems. It's not just programmers and computer scientists and doctors that just solve problems, and mathematicians. We artists solve problems in all their work. It's all about solving problems to reach your result. So yeah, definitely learn how to correct your mistakes and learn how to get better off your mistakes. Use them as a mountain to climb so you can reach the top. Amen. All right. Then creating methods or systems to simplify your process or your approaches, such as for when you're trying to understand anatomy, or when you're trying to understand figure drawing, or when you're trying to set up a composition, etc. Not that you follow a set of rules, because artists over history have never really wanted to bind themselves to a set of rules, much as how they wanted to just have a process and an algorithm or a method of just how they would approach their subjects without going all over the place, so they can have a like when you ride a bike, you're not trying to ride the bike 15 different ways that you've understood. You're trying to ride the bike how you understand, how you've made yourself to understand that this is how I approach riding the bike. This is how I sit on the seat. This is how I drive the car. This is how I play basketball. This is how I dribble the ball. This is what works for me. This is what makes me achieve my results better or more efficiently. So yes, all the great artists of all time have had processes or methods to achieve the finished results, or even just the process of starting the drawing, starting the line work, starting the values, starting the fundamentals. They all had a process or a method of achieving a desired result of whatever it is in the drawing or the art. So yes, create methods that help you. Create systems and processes that help you. Even programmers, everybody in the world creates methods and tries to solve their problem, simplifying their problem by simplifying it into smaller problems that can be simplified with methods that solve the greater problem, which is the grand problem, which solves the whole problem. All right? So think of these methods as guides. They're not a dictator. They're more of a guide. A guide. All right? So yeah, number 5. Instead of only drawing, take some time to actually study. I wish I would have told myself this years ago. Like when I just would, you just want to draw. You just want to get, there's nothing wrong with drawing. Sketch your life away. Sketch all you want. That's great. Sketching is great. It loosens you up. It gets you in the motions. It gets you studying things. You actually learn while you sketch. It's great for your repetition and your muscle memory. But at the same time, and committing to your visual memory in your library in your mind of pictures and methods. But it also, though, you want to take time to actually study, like actually knowledge, learn and understand and observe and analyze things, and then commit those things to memory, whatever you can. Because that is really where artist grows. You should be able to, after a while, go outside and sit in front of a tree landscape, an ocean landscape, and just use what you've learned to apply values, to apply composition, to apply forms, to apply gradients, to apply all these different types of fundamentals to what you're drawing, without having to refer to a book or without having to think too hard about it, because you've committed it to memory, just like riding a bike, just like playing basketball, just like playing a video game. You've learned how to do this move. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to go to the move list anymore. You see what I'm saying? So it's the same thing with drawing. It's the same thing with painting. It's the same thing with art, period. You commit things to memory over time, but you have to observe and you have to actually analyze those things. So part of art is definitely learning and understanding and gaining knowledge that you can use practically. That's a huge part of getting better faster and improving faster, is how you need to analyze and actually study your subject, study your what you're trying to achieve, study it. If you're trying to draw an arm realistically, study how an arm looks realistically, study how it moves, study how the hand moves. If you're trying to draw feet, study feet, study how the feet and the toes move, study how they're drawn, how do they take up space in life, how do they move, how does the torso move, how does If you're trying to draw an animal, study how an animal moves, study how the ocean moves, study how the water moves when the waves rock. Study these things, because that's when you're truly going to have your realistic, if you're going for a realistic approach, that's when you're truly going to have the rendering you're looking for. If you're going for a cartoonistic approach, you can have, by having the realistic understanding, you can make a better cartoon approach for your desired result. So analyzing and studying and adding that knowledge to your repertoire is highly crucial if you want to achieve a mastery level of artwork. All right. Number 6. This is not really a rule, and none of them are rules, but this is something I found that helped me. Every artist should try to understand what materials that works best for them, or that what materials gravitate to them, and what materials what materials do they gravitate to, what materials do they work with well together, like that they feel like that's their long lost partner. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, like for me, I tried a number of different tools and materials, but like the pencil. Since we've been using pencils all our life, the pencil is just something I love to use. I've always drawn with the pencil, so moving to colored pencil was a natural move for me. Painting is not as natural for me, but because I know how to draw, painting is not as hard to learn. But I can say the most natural for me is the pencil. Anything that uses like a pencil stroke, like a pen or a brush pen or a pencil or a colored pencil or anything like that, that's the best feeling for me. But some people might be more comfortable with brushes, like paint brushes and whatnot. So you have to choose, after using many things, what is your go-to tools. And even when you're shopping online, just sometimes you might want to buy a whole bunch of things to try them out, and that's great because you can try and see which brands of these art suppliers work best for what I'm trying to do, or work best for the look, the style that I have as an artist. What works best for me? It might not what work best for you might not work best for somebody else. So you got to just find what works best for you. Just like this paper works really good for me, you might prefer another type of paper, and it doesn't necessarily mean my art is going to be better than your art. It just means that paper works better for your style, or the way the look you're trying to achieve versus the look I'm trying to achieve. All right, so know your materials the same way a carpenter knows his materials, the same way a mason knows his materials, the same way a painter or a sculptor knows his materials to achieve their results, right? All right, number 7, simplify your subject matter into shapes. Get familiar with shapes and turning them in space. On a two-dimensional canvas, get familiar and get really, really comfortable with turning the shapes in space. That is a fundamental skill. Knowing how to see shapes, knowing how to see life and convert those life objects into shapes, whether that's unnatural shapes or natural shapes. So natural, such as types of squares, spheres, and cylinders, as well as unnatural shapes such as perfect squares, circles, and trapezoids. Because those type of unnatural shapes, they don't really appear in life. Like, you're not going to see a human being with a perfectly circular head. It's going to be somewhat of a circle. It's going to be a sphere. Just like feet. Feet are not perfectly rectangles. Coming from the ankle, they're like a rectangle that ends in a trapezoid. So you have to understand how to see shapes and how to observe shapes and how to implement those shapes, and also turn them in space. Because when you want to start understanding perspective, you're going to want to start understanding or grasping and mastering how to turn those shapes in those perspectives, because that's when you're truly going to understand how to use the canvas to your advantage. All right. So it is the simplifying of forms into shapes. The simplifying of forms into shapes allows you as an artist to capture the masses of your subject. So what you're trying to do as an artist is just capture the masses of your subject. So like this right here is a cylinder shape, and the top is a ellipse, or we call it an ellipse. It's like a sphere that moves in space. As you can see, that changes in space. But no matter how you turn the cylinder, the cylinder will always be a cylinder. It might look like a sphere in some parts, but it will always be a cylinder in its base form. That's how perspective works, and that's how shapes work. Once you understand that principle, it'll take you a long, long way. So yeah, you want to learn how to capture the masses of your subject and convert them into shapes, or see them as shapes, and then you want to work into those shapes and refine and define those shapes, which it makes it more efficient, because instead of just drawing the whole subject from the beginning, completely detailed, when you work from the from the mass to when you work from the mass to create the form, and then refine the form into a subject, which decreases the room for error. So that's a process that I do. A lot of artists do that. Most artists, when you see their finished work, they didn't just start with that finished work. I mean, it's not that you can't do that, because even I could do that, but what simplifies the process and it almost ensures you to have a perfect drawing or near perfect drawing is when you go through the process or your method of achieving that result, instead of just going for the result. All right? Trust me, there's many artists, most professional artists use these methods and these processes, or even their own processes and methods of achieving that result without going straight for it. All right, number 8. The last one is learn your fundamentals. Go back to them over and over again. Even when you become an extremely great artist, go back to your fundamentals. Note your fundamentals. Write down your fundamentals. Practice those fundamentals. And actually work on mastering them. The more efficient you are at the fundamentals, the better you will be overall. And nothing should be out of your artistic ability the more experienced you become. So I will have to stress this. Go back to your fundamentals. Please, go back to your fundamentals. Don't leave them out. They're so important. We might want to draw all these detailed things, and you want to draw all the highlights and the lines and the curves and the details and all the little nicks and crannies and stuff like that makes it pop. But you want to learn the fundamentals and get that down perfectly, or at least get, not perfectly, but you're not going to get it perfectly right away. But the fact that you keep going back to them, the fact that you base all your art off of the fundamentals, you will always have it in the back of your mind to say, you know what? I gotta get my fundamentals down. Whenever I try to draw something, I'm gonna apply my fundamentals to it. I'm not gonna just draw it and just go for it all out. I'm gonna apply the fundamentals of value. I'm gonna apply the fundamentals of perspective. I'm gonna apply the fundamentals of construction. I'm gonna apply the fundamentals of composition. I'm gonna apply the fundamentals of proportion. I'm gonna apply the fundamentals of shapes. I'm going to apply the fundamentals of tone. I'm going to apply all of these fundamentals of lighting and darkness and shadow and color. And if there's not color, how do I render values without color, which is just using values of light and dark? And understanding the contrast I'm going to apply contrast, because contrast is pleasing to the eye. And it makes it look more realistic. It makes it three-dimensional when you have contrast. It doesn't make it look flat. So understanding these fundamentals, it really pops. Knowing to use a dark value where a shadow is most prolific. Knowing to use a lighter value where the light is more hitting the object. Knowing this really improves your drawing. Even if you can't make the figure or the art or whatever object look perfect as far as the proportions, just knowing the values can make your art look great. Just the values alone. Everything around us is value. So we need to understand that everything we do is value. Everything we see is value. Of light and dark, of color, less color and more color, of more light hitting that color and less light hitting that color. And that's just how it is. So that's the rules of our art, the rules of the world, the rules of life, how we see it through these eyes. All right, so this is Nico Lion, and I want to thank you guys for visiting my video and checking it out again. And you already know I'm going to bring back some more videos as we improve here. And I'm going to show you guys some more tips, and just use these to the best of your ability. And of course, do not forget your fundamentals. All right. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.